Good morning. I am Mark Allenbaugh with SentencingStats.com. It is March 15, 2018. Today we are discussing the Theranos case. Yesterday, the SEC announced a $700 million civil securities fraud complaint against Ms. Elizabeth Holmes, the CEO of Theranos. She has not been charged with a criminal case yet, but as is often the case, most likely a federal indictment will issue shortly. So I'm going to assume today, for purposes of our analysis, that she is charged with a $700 million securities fraud, and if so, and she's convicted either by going to trial or pleading guilty, what is her likely sentence? Well, the good news for Ms. Holmes is that since 2006, which was right after the U.S. Supreme Court announced that the federal sentencing guidelines were merely advisory, the rate of compliance with the guidelines or sentences within the guidelines has dropped off dramatically, and sentences being imposed below the guidelines have increased quite a bit. So in 2006, the rate of sentences within the white-collar sentencing guidelines, which is 2B 1.1, was around 70%. As of last fiscal year, it was only 44%. The green line here indicates how frequently judges are going below the sentencing guidelines when they impose a white-collar sentence. So it was only 14.5% in 2006, but that is nearly doubled to 28.7% in fiscal year 2017. So that's the good news. The likely that it is likely she has, or I should say, she has a very good chance of receiving a below guideline sentence. So what will the guidelines look like for her? They don't look good. Here's the bad news for her, and this is really the result, and it's not too surprising, of a $700 million loss. We start at a base offense level of 7 for the securities fraud. She's going to get 30 additional offense levels because of that $700 million loss, which actually is off the charts for the loss table under the sentencing guidelines, which maxes out at $550 million. Certainly there are more than 10 victims, so she's going to get 2 levels there. Sophisticated means, obviously, with respect to the fraud that she committed. Obviously, it also violated the securities law. And, of course, as the CEO, she had a leadership role, so she's going to get another 4 points for that. She'll have 3 points reduced if she accepts responsibility. But here's the unfortunate and ironic thing. Even with those 3 points for accepting responsibility, she's at a 46, which literally is off the sentencing chart or the sentencing table, which maxes out at 43. So the guidelines really don't give her any incentive to plead guilty in and of themselves. She may as well go to trial, because either way she ends up the same. It's going to be over an offense level 43. Technically, the guidelines call for life, but under this securities fraud statute that she likely will be convicted or charged with and potentially convicted of, there is no life sentence available. So what judges do in a situation like that is the guidelines then recommend the statutory maximum. And that's going to, the statutory maximum penalty for 1 count of securities fraud is 20 years. If she's convicted of 2 counts, now it's 40 years, 3 counts, 60 years, so on and so forth. But here is sort of good news for her, that 1 count, 2 counts, or 100 counts of securities fraud, they're all treated the same as 1 count for sentencing purposes under the guidelines. And even though the guidelines are going to max her out and recommend a sentence of life or the statutory maximum, most likely she's not going to get that. So what this case summary represents is a review of the 850,000 defendants that have been sentenced under the guidelines between 2006 and 2016, which is the last year that the Commission has published its data files. Out of those 850,000, there were 153 defendants that were sentenced under the white-collar sentencing guidelines that had an offense level of 43 and in criminal history 1, meaning they had little to no criminal history. I think it's a safe bet that Ms. Holmes doesn't have any. So assuming people just like her, we can see there was 153, but they only received an average of 182 months. and the median sentence was only 12 years, or 144 months. Fully 88.2% of those 153 people received a below guideline sentence. So actually, the chances of her getting a below guideline sentence are extremely high. And the question really is, well, how far below the guidelines? Well, that's what this answers here. If we look in the Ninth Circuit, well, there's only been 12 cases. It's from 2006 to 2016. So they're a little bit higher, but the size, the sample size, if you will, is quite a bit smaller. And there's only been one in the Northern District of California where she most likely will be prosecuted. That's where the SEC complaint was. And there, that one other case received 260 months, which would be higher than the statutory maximum if she's only convicted of one count. So she wouldn't be eligible for that, assuming convicted of only one count. Most likely here, though, she's going to be convicted of multiple counts. But be that as it may, the most significant statistic here is the national one, and that's what judges are directed to look at. So she's still looking at a significant sentence somewhere around 12 to 15 years. Is, I think, a very good statistical estimate of what she's looking at. Certainly a lot better than what the guidelines recommend, which is either life or the statutory maximum. But nonetheless, it's still a serious sentence. She'll have to serve 85% of that time, whatever time that is imposed upon her. In the last 6 to 12 months of her sentence, she'll be able to serve either in home confinement or community confinement. But the bottom line is she's going to be doing some significant time. Thank you very much. I hope you found this educational. Again, please visit us at sentencingstats.com.